Humans interact with teams
Communication
based on
systems within which they seek to live by their interaction
specific
partners
or how they interact.
Good day, ma'am. In this moment, our group will present a video discussion of what we have learned in symbolic interaction and our concept about social interactions. But before we proceed in our video discussion, I'm going to present first the members of our group, which is the Group 1. Norlin F. Sumilhing, Razel Paez, Sarah Lucero, Samantha Angela Dubduban, Jillian Sitaw, Aryan Democrito, Leia May Bronzal, Jimuel Belaong, Rani Ladrillo, Oliver Caro. Let's start the discussion now.
When we say social interaction, what comes to your mind? So for me, social interaction or the study of social interaction needs to have or involves to have a careful assessment of the daily practices of communicating between people in various contexts. So just like a doctor-patient visits in the organization or human-computer communication. So it involves two or more people or things that communicate with each other. So that's what we call social interaction. So researchers or scholars who center their work in this area tend to be one of these two research lines. So the first research lines that I have researched is that scholars or equalitative research who centered their studies in the intricacies of language and nonverbal communication. So commonly they focus their studies in what we call language and social interaction. So the language they are using, the words they use with each other, or how they interact using the language, that makes a communication a better communication. So that's what we call the first research lines. So the second research line is that researchers or scholars focus their works in the methods or approaches that people use when communicating with each other. So in other words, they focus on the methods, the structures and patterns that people use to communicate with each other in the society. So that's the two focus of the scholars or the studies of the scholars, that they tend to put into context on how these people interact with each other. So they are more likely to have a different context, but for some reason they allow our readers, or they allow their readers to examine how complicated or how the human language is being used in a communication.
Social interaction is an exchange between two or more individuals and is a building block of society. Social interaction can be studied between groups of 2 dyads, 3 triads, or a larger social groups.
Let's define the following key terms. Dyad, a pair of things standing in a particular relation or dyadic relation. Social interaction, a social exchange between two or more individuals. Social group, a collection of humans or animals that share certain characteristics, interact with one another, accept expectations and obligations as members of the group, and share a common identity.
Social interaction is a dynamic sequence of social actions between individuals or groups who modify their actions and reactions due to actions by their interaction partners. Social interactions can be differentiated into accidental, repeated, regular, and regulated. These interactions form the basis for social structure and, therefore, are a key object of basic social inquiry and analysis.
Social structures and cultures are founded upon social interactions. By interacting with one another, people design rules, institutions, and systems within which they seek to live. Symbols are used to communicate the expectations of a given society to those new to it, either children or outsiders. Through this board schema of social development, one sees how social interaction lies at its core.
The empirical study of social interaction is one of the subjects of microsociology, which concerns the nature of everyday human social interactions and agency on a small scale. Methods include symbolic interactionism and ethnomethodology, as well as later academic subdivisions and studies like psychological studies, conversational analysis, and human-computer interaction.
Hey there! In addition to symbolic interactionism, the reality is seen as social developed interaction with others. It argues that both individuals and society cannot be separated far from each other for two reasons. One is they are both created through social interaction. The second reason is they cannot be understood in terms without the other.
Let's proceed to the symbolic interaction. Symbolic interactionism is a micro-level theory that focuses on the relationships among individuals within a society. Communication, the exchange of meaning through language and symbols, is believed to be how people make sense of their social worlds. Theorists Herman and Reynolds 1994 note that this perspective sees people being active in sharing the social world rather than simply being acted upon. Herbert Mead 1931 is considered a founder of this symbolic interactionism, though he never published his work on it. La Rosa and Riches 1993.
Mead student Herbert Bloomer coined the term symbolic interactionism and outlined their basic premises. Humans interact with things based on meanings ascribed to those things. The ascribed meaning of things comes from our interactions with others and society.
The meaning of these things are interpreted by a person when dealing with things in specific circumstances, by Bloomer on 1969. So for example, if you like books, symbolic interactionists might propose that you learn that books are good or important, and the interactions you had with family, friends, school or church. Or maybe your family have a special reading time each week. Getting your library card was treated as a special event, or bedtime stories were associated with warmth and comfort.
Social scientists who apply symbolic interactionist thinking look for patterns of interactions between individuals. These patterns often involve observation of one-on-one interactions. For example, while a conflict theory studying political protest might focus on class difference, a symbolic interactionist would be more interested in how individuals in the protesting groups interact, as well as the signs and symbols protesters use for communicate for their message.
Studies that use symbolic interactionist perspective are more likely to use qualitative research methods such as deep interviews or participants observations because they seek to understand the symbolic worlds in which research subjects live.
In conclusion, with symbolic interactionism as a social theoretical framework starts from the presupposition that our social world is constructed through the mundane acts of everyday social interaction. Through the repetitive act of interaction, individuals as actors about social groups constitute symbolic and shared meanings. Importantly, symbolic interactionism does not deny the unique. It is directly concerned with how distinctive meanings are adopted and interpreted through social practice.
Methodologically, symbolic interaction are generally investigated through various qualitative approaches, such as ethnography or participant observation.
Geographers' interest in symbolic interactions develop in parallel to growing interest in humanistic philosophies as well as cultural and social theory.
Post-positivist geographies, in particular, have been influenced by social interactionist approaches, which continue to investigate the complex relationships between individuals and societies.
More generally, everyone's interest in symbolic interactions stems for a larger concern with symbolic social practices, particularly as the symbolic informs understanding of and meanings found in the various social spaces.